It's common for new players of tabletop role-playing games to build their character, well, wrong for lack of a better word. That's how you get things like a ranged rogue character that puts all their ability score in strength, which doesn't help them with their ranged attacks. Or the bard that decides that their charisma is going to be their lowest ability score. So, in order to help alleviate that problem, I'm talking about an optimal build for barbarians. Hey fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard Quiner, and welcome back to the RPG Daily, your daily dose of all things tabletop role-playing games, helping you build your world and master your game. And today, this is actually the end of the Barbarian series. I had been doing several other videos about Barbarians. Yesterday was the other day I did the top primal paths. I decided I wanted to do one more video about Barbarians before moving on to the next one, and this one is about optimal Barbarian builds. Something that a new player can watch this video and walk away and have their character basically figured out for their first game. That's the idea of this one, is give the new players something that they can use to build a good character, so to speak. Granted, like everything, this is kind of my opinions. I do look at a lot of the numbers in this, or, some of the stats, but I didn't go to that min-max level of optimization. I didn't take it to an extreme. So I am just talking about my opinion on this and what build I would suggest for beginners, I guess we could call it. But I want to call it optimized, so I'm calling it optimized. First thing you need to know about actually playing a barbarian as a character is for building it, you're going to be leaning into making it useful in one specific time, and that time is combat. A barbarian is not an all-arounder kind of class. It's not there so you can pick locks and steal things and then convince people that you're their friend. It's really there to break things and smash things and hit things hard. So when I'm talking about an optimal build for Barbarian, I'm talking about making a build that fills that purpose. Another thing you need to know about Barbarians, they have an interesting way of working that requires a risk versus rewards kind of mindset. They have a lot of abilities that give them advantages on certain things, but those abilities also take away other parts of the Barbarian. For example, there is an ability where you can get advantage on attacks against your enemies, but in exchange they get advantage on attacks against you. That's the risk versus reward nature of Barbarians, and you're going to see that a lot throughout the build, and just by playing the game, playing Barbarians, you're going to see that. So for this build, the main goal, as I said, is to hit harder. Survivability of the Barbarian is going to be a second kind of thing. So first up, ability scores for this Barbarian. I'm dealing with the standard array because I don't know what you're going to do. If you roll the dice, you can make your decisions on that. But for the standard array, the scores that you can assign to your abilities are 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. So of course you want to be the strongest, so that 15 is going straight to your strength. The 14 would go to your constitution, the 13 to dexterity. The 12 I'm going to assign to wisdom because that is more used against charms and things like that. The 10 will go to charisma to make them a little, better in social situations. And the lowest score, the 8, as is called a dump stat, is the intelligence. Barbarians are not known to be smart. If you're playing a barbarian trying to be the smart one, that's just not going to work out as well as you might hope. So 15 strength, 14 constitution, 13 dexterity, 12 wisdom, 10 charisma, and 8 intelligence. That's the base starting point of your ability scores. Next, you need to pick a race that works well with a barbarian. Now, I will strongly encourage any player to pick whatever race they want for whatever class they want. It doesn't have to be the perfect race, but since this video is about optimizing, the idea behind picking a race for Barbarian is to pick the races that give it the highest strength bonus and a high constitution bonus. There are several races that give you a +2 to strength. We're talking about the half-orc, the Goliath, the mountain dwarf, the bugbear is kind of a monster race, and the minotaur is another one that's more on the monster side. All of those races will give a +2 to your strength, which will take that 15 up to a 17, which is a really good number for a starting level barbarian. But for me, for this build, I want to go a little more optimized. I want to have something that is a little more useful for this barbarian at the start. So I decided to look at the mountain dwarf because dwarves all get a +2 to their constitution as well. if you were to compare the stats you get from the other ones, most of them give a +1 to Constitution, or maybe a +1 to Wisdom, or to Dex, something like that, just a +1. But the Mountain Dwarf has that sweet spot where it's a +2 Constitution and a +2 to Strength as well. So that is why for this optimized build, I'm picking a Mountain Dwarf for this Barbarian. That +2 takes the Constitution up to a 16, which is also a very good starting point for Barbarians. Next up, you need to pick a background that is actually helpful for your Barbarian. Now, backgrounds give you, as I talked about in other videos, the backgrounds give you some skills and some items and a special feat, like a feature that you get to use in the game. For Barbarians, there is the iconic Outlander background, which gives you Athletic and Survival as your free skills. So then you could pick different skills with the Barbarian class abilities. But it's also been argued that the Sailor background is even better because it gives you the Athletics and it gives you Perception proficiencies, which both are very useful in the game, probably used more often than Survival is in the game. And with the Sailor, you get the feature of being able to find some free ship transportation wherever you go. So that is a really good background for that. But here's where I'm going to veer off a little bit, because I wanted to look for something that can give me, the Barbarian, something that I can't normally get proficient in. Meaning, I wanted to look at the skills that I got from the backgrounds and pick things that aren't always, among my free skills. So I picked the Urchin background for this. Now, the Urchin gives me Sleight of Hand and Stealth. And at first thing about it, those are kind of dumb. Not really something a Barbarian needs, but having played plenty of games, Stealth, I believe, is one of the highest used skills in the game. And if you've ever played with an adventure party and you've been that one that just can't roll good on their Stealth ever, as Barbarians often do, you're usually going to be the one left behind when the rogue or somebody decides they want to sneak ahead or they want to check out a dangerous place, but they have to be quiet about it. Having the proficiency in Stealth, along with our 13 to Dexterity, sets us up for more success in sneaking around. The Sleight of Hand is not that useful, so maybe that is considered a wasted proficiency, but it's not the end of the world, because when you do take the Barbarian class, you get 2 free skills, or skill proficiencies, and we can use those to put those in definitely Athletics, that's the important one, and second, you could probably do Perception, or one of the other, Survival is another thematic kind of skill that people use. So with skill proficiencies, when you take the class, you get 2 free skills. If you decided to go the Urchin route like I did, I'm going to use these 2 free skills to get my Athletics, and then probably also Perception, because that's another useful skill in the game. I really think in the game, you're mostly looking at Perception and Stealth, I want to say are like the 2 top rolled skill checks. So getting proficient in those is going to make you more useful and more safe in your game. If you decided to go the Sailor route, you'll already have Athletics and Perception for free from that background. The downside of this is the other skills for a Barbarian aren't the best for Barbarian, so I would just take the Intimidation and Survival probably in that case. Even though Intimidation is a Charisma stat, it's not the best one for a Barbarian, and Survival is really more thematic, depending on the campaign you're playing. It may or may not come into play. But either way, you got a good solid set of 4 skills that you are proficient in. Personally, I would go the Urchin and then add the Athletics and Perception on with the Barbarian class. When we're talking about equipment, every game master kind of sets up their games a little differently, where you can either buy equipment or start with the starting equipment. For the sake of convenience, for this guide, we're just going to do starting equipment. Realistically, from this starting list, first up, you want to take the Great Axe. The Great Axe has the highest hit die or damage die in the game. It's a 1d12, which is fantastic. With the d12, this comes in the risk reward, where you have the potential, yes, of rolling a 1, but you also have the potential of rolling a 12 on your damage. So that is why I say take the Great Axe. Lean into that risk versus reward factor, and it just, from a thematic element, it just seems cool. The second option on your starting equipment, to me, is kind of a dumb choice. It's 2 hand axes or a simple weapon. If you are leaning into the axes, cool, take your hand axes. I guess they give you a chance of having, dual wield weapons if you want to do that in, a sneaky situation. You could also throw them but your ranged attacks is also covered by javelins. So this is really just up to you. If I were playing this, I would probably be the barbarian that decides to take a simple weapon, and I would take a great club, which does 1d8 bludgeoning damage, because that gives me a little more damage output. And if for some reason I don't have my great axe on me, I can use the great club in a pinch. I feel like that's good. I haven't seen a whole lot of use of the hand axes as a useful weapon. Like, if I'm getting in a fight, I'm going to use my great axe. If I'm going to throw something, I'm going to use my javelins. Hand axes are just kind of there for flavor, so why not be the barbarian that's hauling around 2 big weapons and a bunch of javelins and just be cool that way? I know it's really up to you, that second line option on the equipment. Then, of course, you do get your 4 javelins and you get an explorer's pack. And those javelins do 1d6 damage on their hits, and those will fill in your ranged attacks. As a barbarian, your main thing is going to be close that distance and get into melee range with most of your enemies, but the javelins will help out when you need them. Next, talking about the primal path that we're going to choose, and I've done all the videos on primal paths, and I talked about my 3 favorite. This may surprise you, though. I am not picking the totem warrior, I'm picking the zealot. And I believe the zealot is one of the best simple classes, and it's more optimized than the others because of the abilities you get from being a zealot. Barbarian just gives you a little more damage output, a little more usability in terms of helping out your friends, your allies. The reason I decided to pick the zealot primal path is mainly because of its different features. They seemed a little more consistently useful than the other primal paths in terms of barbarians that want to hurt things. So, like, right away you can deal some radiant or necrotic damage on your attacks, which that's useful. You're just hurting something a little more. When you get your fanatical focus, that is a way to help with your charm and being charmed. Then you have the option to help your allies by giving advantage to your allies through your zealot presence, whatever that's called. Then, of course, your zealot capstone, your high-end zealot ability of the Rage Beyond Death, is way powerful and just perfect for a high-level barbarian. So that is why I decided for an optimized build, I would say zealot is probably the most optimized primal path. Next up, we're talking about feats and ability score improvements. Now, you, as a barbarian, you have, I believe, 5 points in time where you can either do a ability score improvement, where I mentioned you can raise 1 ability score by 2 or 2 ability scores by 1, or you can take a feat out of the player handbook or wherever the feats are found. These are going to happen at levels 4, 8, 12, 16, and 19. So you have these 5 chances to do some changes to your character. In my version of this optimized build, I am mixing and matching ability score improvements and feats. I'm not relying on one only. I'm not just going to make it all a bunch of feats. I'm not just going to make it all ability score improvements. We're going to mix it up a little bit to get something I think will work best and work awesome for a barbarian. So early on at level 4, I'm going to take the feat of the Great Weapon Master because I want to amp up my damage output at early levels, but I will lean into the risk versus reward to make that work, because the Great Weapon Master, if you remember, you take a penalty on your attack roll in exchange for more damage on your damage rules. So that's I would take at level 4. At level 8, it's kind of a toss-up here because I want to get some ability score improvements, but I don't want to waste the ability score improvement chance. So I decided here to take the Athlete feat. Now, Athlete, I didn't mention before in the Great Feats for Barbarian because I didn't notice it, but it gives you a +1 to your Strength and a +1 to your Dexterity. Dexterity is not the most important thing for a Barbarian, but hear me out. It gives you a +1 to both of those, plus it gives you some more mobility perks, such as being able to stand up by only using 5 feet of your movement instead of half of your movement, and some other things that keep you moving and keeps you from getting stuck. Now, with our current ability scores being Strength of 17 and Charisma of 13, it's a good idea to put 1 point in each of those, because by jumping our Strength up to 18 and our Charisma up to 14, the modifiers that we use on those skills will bump up by 1 as well. So 18 would then make us a +4 on our Strength, and kicking that 13 up to the 14 would give us a +2, I believe. Yeah, that would give us a +2 on our Dexterity stuff. So that increases our armor class. That helps out in other things. So that's why I chose this feat. I think this one, for this particular build, just made the most sense of getting the most bang for the buck out of this. Because it's almost like getting an ability score improvement, but then you get a little extra something on the side because it's a feat. At level 12 is when I decided to make my Barbarian the max strength. I took the ability score improvement, dumped both of those scores into strength. So now my strength is 20, which means I'm rolling with a +5 strength on everything, which is awesome. It's going to be doing a lot more damage. It's going to be great. Plus, it sets you up for better success later on when you get other abilities that boost your scores even higher above 20. At level 16, I would like to take my crappy damage rolls and make them better, so I'm going to take the Savage Attacker feat, which means I can reroll some damage die here and there, and improve the damage that I deal on my turns. At level 19, almost at level 20, we're going to be pretty strong. These ability scores, they'll help somewhat, but I'm still going to take the ability score improvement, put 2 more points into my Constitution to kick that up to an 18. This will increase my armor class a little more, or just gives me a little bit more health here. I already had a pretty good Constitution score. This just helps a tiny bit more at the high levels. Then when you hit level 20 for a Barbarian, they have that feat that kicks your strength and Constitution up above 20. So that's going to kick these up into the, I want to say 24 and 22 area. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with that. If not, I'll put a text saying that I messed up my math. Some variation of this schedule of feats and ability score improvements I think would work. You could also go the route of putting your ability score improvements early on, get your strength up to 20 as quick as possible, your Constitution as high as you want, and then use the feats later on in the game. I personally like to get some feats early and change up the gameplay a little bit that way. I think that works well for Barbarians. That is the basic optimized build for a Barbarian, considering the Mountain Dwarf, the Urchin class. It's a little weird, I know, but to me, it just makes sense that you do that and you get a little more out of it. If you agree or disagree with this build, let me know in the comments below, of course. And of course, in your games, magic items will always come into effect and change how things work. I can't tell you what your DM will give you in terms of magic items, so you'll just have to wing that. Anyways, I've been Richard. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see on the channel, remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified when I upload new videos. You can also click over here to see more videos in this playlist, or over here to see what YouTube suggests you watch from my channel.